Alrighty, welcome to Friday. Good job with that math yesterday. And I also assigned you the African Grove. So let's talk about that for a minute before we do our reading today. So the African Grove Theater was a real black theater in New York, in Manhattan. That's what the author of this book of Dactyl Hill based the Zanzibar Theater on. People that write historical fiction oftentimes look stuff up and do research about that time period, and then they put little things that are real history inside of their story, and that's what he did. You probably read about William Henry Brown and how he started it. He was from West Indies, means one of the islands. We don't know which one. And you probably read that there were 300 seats in it, and Henry, the brown guy, was the one who started it. And you probably read that they did a little different kinds of plays besides Shakespeare. They also did some comedy and some pantomime. Pantomime is when you don't talk, you just use your hands to do things and your body. And then he wrote this play, The Drama of the King Shot Away, which was the first play written by a black person in America. And it was about the Black Carib War. That's down in the islands as well, the Caribbean. And the famous people that were the stars of the theater down there were our James Hewlett and Ira Aldridge. And you might hear that name, James Hewitt, in the book. I think it's in there. All right, so good job reading that. Today, Friday, do the reading warm-up at some point. Did George Washington fight in the Civil War? George Washington was a Revolutionary War general, but he was still alive during the Civil War, so we wonder if he was part of it, or was he? Then we're going to read Chapter 3 together, and you're going to do the guided reading and the journal writing for Chapter 3, and take a picture and send it to me, and that's it for today. There's no other extra papers to do, just the Dactyl Hill. And then Monday, you're going to be doing Chapter 4. Alrighty. Take a look at your dinosaur guide as we're reading. Today we're going to meet this guy. They call him a knuckle skull. His real name is Pachycephalosaurus. And look at his giant head. I guess he used to bash people with his head. Let's see who else we've heard. Sauropods, which Brachiosaurus is a kind of a sauropod, but there's more than one kind. I don't know, have we heard about duckbills? I can't remember. Was that who was lighting the lights? I think maybe. We've heard brachiosauruses. We haven't seen any microraptors yet. No, it was the iguanodon, I think, that was lighting the lights. We've heard about them. And triceratops. So if you want to know what these guys look like, that's why I gave you this. Alrighty, let's read our questions and our vocabulary. The chapter 3, is called Knuckle Skull Checkpoint. And it starts on page 17. And our vocabulary is knuckle skull, which is a Pachycephalosaurus. We just looked at him. Irrelevant means not connected or relevant to something, random. Doesn't go along with the subject. It's off topic. Manumission is a fancy word for being released from slavery or being freed from slavery. A fugitive is a person who's escaped from a place, like a slave, or is in hiding. And slaves that escaped from down south and came up north were considered, by the Southerners, were considered fugitives. And they tried to come and get them back. And the slaves said, no, I'm free. I'm in a free state. But then they passed a law where they could come and get them, which was not fun. Magnanimous means generous or forgiving, especially toward a less powerful person. And a magistrate is an officer or judge who administers the law, kind of like a fancy police officer. Our questions today are, why does the police officer on the knuckle skull stop the trike wagon? Number 2, why does Riker want paperwork for the orphans? Number 3, what happens to black New Yorkers when they vanish off the streets? And number 4, what does Magdalise do to cause a distraction? And your journal question is about this Riker guy. I'm going to ask you to think and write about Magistrate Riker. What kind of a person do you think he is? And I want you to give 2 examples of things he says or does that support your idea of what kind of character he is. Is he nice? Is he mean? Is he bossy? Is he cruel? Is he a racist? Is he crabby? Is he smart? Is he dumb. And the thing about books is a lot of times they don't come right out and tell you what the characters are like, but you can guess by what they say and what they do. So you're looking at evidence for things he says and he does to support your opinion of him, Magistrate Riker. Okay? All right, so turn your books to page 17, have your guided reading ready to go, and here we go. Chapter 3, Knuckle Skull Checkpoint. Had Magdalene somehow heard the dino? Oh, remember what happened at the end of the last chapter? I should review that. At the end of the last chapter, there was a loud screaming in Magdalene's head, and she didn't know what it was. And you were supposed to guess what you think it is. So let's see if you were right. Had Magdalene somehow heard the dino get spooked inside her head? It certainly seemed like it. No one else seemed to notice at all, and now she realized they were all staring at something just above her. A knuckle skull loomed its ugly face over the wagon. Uneven bony growths made the dino's head look like a clenched fist with the snout poking out. It was reared all the way up on its huge hind legs, shorter forelimbs pawing idly at the wood planks. Dr. Barlow Sloane, the Dino Guide guy, spent a whole chapter of the Dino Guide trashing knuckle skulls. Ugly, irrelevant, useless, lazy, good for nothing, abrupt, flatulent, that means they have gas, and petulant were some of the choice adjectives he'd selected for them. Magdalise had no idea how a dino could be relevant, let alone irrelevant, or whether one species would really be more prone to dino farts than another. But either way, it seemed like Dr. Sloane was having a bad day when he wrote that entry. The dino blinked twice, then wheezed and snorted, eyeing the orphans. Its rider, a helmeted police officer with an unpleasant frown, growled at Marietta. "What business have you to do with these colored children in the city tonight?" "Why, I don't see how that's any business of yours," Marietta snapped. She was the youngest matron, and really the only one that seemed to actually talk to the orphans instead of at them. "Ah, officer!" Von Marsh twittered, hurrying to the front of the cart. "Pay no mind to Marietta. She's quite fiery, you know. We're simply taking them to the theatre, young sir." Magdalise saw Sabine wrap her small hand around Amaya's and squeeze. Mapper and Two-Step stood perfectly still, hands at their sides. "Well, this isn't a good night to be out." The officer shifted his mouth around like he was chewing on the words some before he spat them out. With their likes." He nodded at Magdalise, Two-Step, Mapper, Amaya, and Sabine. Magdalise felt her stomach sink. Whatever the cop's talking about must be why the city's so creepy quiet, she thought, and then no theater. It felt ridiculous to care about missing out on a play when the whole night seemed so full of danger, but the menacing city only made Magdalise even hungrier to disappear into a fantasy world. "I'm afraid I don't understand what you're saying, young man," Von Marsh said. "I'm Henrietta Von Marsh of the Ladies' Manumission Society, and these children are wards of the Colored Orphan Asylum. Now, if you don't mind, we'll be on our way." Magdalise wasn't sure if that little speech was supposed to settle the matter somehow, but the officer was clearly unmoved. "Lady, haven't you been paying attention? The whole city's about to—" "That's enough, officer!" a voice snapped. The knuckle skull and the cop both startled and then hopped to attention. Varney let out a concerned wheeze and stomped his feet. All five orphans leaned up against the far rail of the wagon to see who had spoken. All right, let's stop for a minute before we find out about this new person and answer our question, why does the police officer on the knuckle skull stop the trike wagon? Because it was not a good night to be out. It's kind of unsafe, huh? And he says, this is not a good night to be out with their legs. Because he kind of also doesn't want them to be out there because they're black. But mainly it's a dangerous night. Now let's see what the other guy says. A middle-aged white man with a clipped, sallow face stood looking up at them. Tufts of white hair sprouted from either side of his otherwise bald head like some distraught nebulous fungi. A shiny medallion punctuated his long black magistrate robes. A roaring tyrannosaurus inside a circle with some writing around it that Magdalene couldn't make out. A medallion is like a button, and so his button has a little symbol on it of a tyrannosaurus. Magistrate Riker, sir, the officer said. I didn't know you were out and about tonight. I was just warning these matrons about. That's enough, I said. Riker's voice was quiet but razor sharp. The officer shut up accordingly. Magdalene took a step back as Riker walked a slow, deliberate strut toward the back of the wagon. Now, Miss Henrietta Von Marsh, of the Ladies' Manumission Society, is it? Henrietta Von Marsh just stared at him for a few moments. Riker mounted the wagon in a single smooth movement, almost like he was more liquid than man. He's smooth. Magdalene felt herself recoil inside, but tried not to let it show on her face. Is it? He said again. Ah, quite, Von Marsh sputtered. Yes, indeed. And Miss Von Marsh of the Ladies' Manumission Society? I believe I overheard you say you were going to the theater. The magistrate drawled the word out with a soft lilt. How charming! And I presume you have paperwork for all these. He scrunched up his face like he'd just swallowed a slightly turned piece of fruit. Children. That kind of tells you what he's like. He doesn't like kids because he makes a bad face when he looks at them. Von Marsh cocked her head. Paperwork? To prove that they're not fugitive slaves, of course. You know we've had terrible trouble with that these days. Contraband. It's illegal to harbor fugitives, particularly in a time of war. He wants their papers because he wants to make sure they're not escaped slaves. Little kids. Really? Like La Migra, isn't it? That's what he's like. So that's your answer to number 2. Why does he want paperwork? To make sure they're not escaped slaves. Why, Magistrate, Von Marsh scoffed. That's not true, but I assure you these are free children and not fugitive slaves in the least. I give you my word as a member of one of the noblest families of New York City. Alas, Magistrate Riker sighed, without proper papers, I'm afraid we'll have to take the children into the custody of the city. Custody of the city? Marietta gasped. You mean prison? Panic seized Magdalene. Prison? Then what? She'd heard stories of black New Yorkers vanishing off the streets, never to be seen again. Folks said they'd been snatched up and sent down south into slavery. Would she survive plantation life? Up front, Varney whinnied and snorted, sending tremors through the wagon. Magdalene didn't know if it was her terror seeping into the dino or his own, but either way she wanted out of there. What happened to the people in New York, the black people? Sometimes they got snatched up and sold back down south into slavery. And that did really happen. People would sometimes even take free black people that never were slaves and send them down south and sell them into slavery. Riker smiled. Prison is such an ugly word, don't you think? She had no idea if she could actually get the dino to do what she wanted, but even if she did, then what? A tired old trike couldn't outrun a knuckle skull, and cops had guns. Not to mention whatever untold horrors lay in wait deeper in the city tonight. Still, if she could get Varney to make a run for it, she could at least cause a distraction. Up, Varney, Magdalene thought. Rear up. Varney immediately squealed and raised his front legs into the air. It worked. She can think and talk to the dinosaurs through her brain. Lifting the cart and sending the knuckle skull stumbling backwards, everyone grabbed the rails to steady themselves. Oh dear, old Brimworth cried, just waking up from what must have been a very pleasant nap. What in heavens is going on? You girl, the cop snapped at Marietta. Control this trike. I'm trying, Marietta said. What did Magdalene do to cause a distraction? She talked in her head to Varney and got him to rear up. She can control dinosaurs with her brain. So am I, Magdalise thought. Riker's glare landed on Magdalise. His eyes narrowed like he was shooting beams of light out of them directly into her soul. Ooh, that tells you what kind of character is narrowing his eyes and glaring. Could he tell what she was trying to do? Magdalise stared back at him. Easy, Varney, she thought. Shh. And Varney settled with a snort and a grumble. I see, Riker said softly, a smile creasing his lips. I see. What's that? Von Marsh asked. Riker whirled around, suddenly magnanimous. He's being fair and generous now. Nothing at all, dear lady. Which theater was it you said you were attending? Magdalise shuddered. Everything in her wanted to be away from this horrible man. Why, the Zanzibar Savannah, of course, Von Marsh said, blinking. Ah, of course, of course. Excellent. Riker slid his icy gaze along each of their faces, stopping once again on Magdalise. He's got an icy gaze. That's like really cold. And what is this unfortunate creature's name? That is Miss Margaret Rochford, 12 years old, magistrate, but I fail to see. That'll be all, Riker snapped, still glaring at Magdalise. He's snapping and glaring. He stared right back at them. Oh, she stared right back at him. Sorry. For once grateful that Von Marsh insisted on calling her the wrong name. Riker finally turned away. You may continue on your journey. Enjoy the theater. He slid off the wagon with that same fluid grace and signaled the still spooked Knuckle to fall back. And then Marietta gave the reins a tug and yelled, Hee-yah! And they were on their way. Magdalise glanced at the frightened faces of her friends, then looked up to the back of the wagon where the magistrate stood staring at her with his searchlight eyes. Oh, I think he knows her secret. I don't know why he let them go. We don't know. And they'll probably find out it later at some point. But first he was going to send them to jail, and he goes, okay, well, you can go. It's got something to do with Magdalise when he found out she can control the dinosaurs. So I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so I hope you got all those questions. And then what you're writing about in your journal is what kind of person do you think Magistrate Riker is? And what makes you think that? Write some examples from the book that tell you what kind of person he is. For example, you could say he's glaring at them. That shows he's kind of mean because a glare is kind of a mean look. Yeah, things like that. 2 things that tell you what kind of person he is. Alrighty, and then take a picture of your journal writing and send it to me. And we will see you on Monday for more fun with the Dactyl Hill Squad. Bye.